Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the misty world of ancient Roman bathhouses, but not during the busy daylight hours. No, tonight we're creeping in after dark, when the marble walls sweat with steam, and the air hums with secrets no daylight dares expose. The glow from oil lamps flickers across damp stone, casting long shadows as bathers slip in quietly. The water's still warm, but the mood has shifted. Less hygiene, more hush-hush conversations, lingering glances, and rituals that blur the line between the sensual and the strange. Now let's be real. You probably wouldn't last long here. Between the scalding heat, the smell of stale sweat and sulfur, and the general lack of clothing-related boundaries, it's a bit much for modern sensibilities. And don't even think about skipping the oil scraping part, they'd notice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck through the low archway of the Thermae, the public bathhouse, as dusk melts into night. The heat hits you first, like walking into a pot left on the stove too long. Then the scent, a sharp blend of wood smoke, damp towels, and something faintly metallic. You squint through the fog, your sandals slapping against wet marble, already slippery from hundreds of bare feet. Inside, things are slower than during the day. Gone are the rowdy children and loud philosophers. The bathhouse after dark is a gentler place, but also stranger. The clientele has changed. More shadows, more silence. Someone in the corner murmurs in Greek. A bored-looking slave ladles water into a shallow basin without lifting his gaze. A group of older men, still wrapped in light linen, sip weak wine near the benches, their conversation soft and private. One laughs, then immediately hushes himself. Even their laughter has a curfew now. Above you, the ceiling is domed, designed to trap the steam. The engineers behind this marvel knew what they were doing. The acoustics are excellent. Too excellent, maybe, if you're trying to keep a secret. You hear everything. The soft clink of ceramic jugs, the squish of sandals on wet stone, the gentle splash of someone easing into water they've already tested with their toe. This is no ordinary spa night. The Roman Thermae were a cultural institution. People didn't just come to bathe. They came to do business, socialize, flirt, and sometimes conspire. And yes, some came just to watch. You notice quickly how little is actually hidden. The architecture encourages exposure. The walls are lined with niches for oil flasks, the benches are communal, the pools open. And yet, privacy exists, subtle, shifting, negotiated. A glance here, a pause there. A nod. Historians still argue whether these after-hours visits were officially condoned or quietly tolerated. Some suggest that night bathing was seen as decadent, a symbol of indulgence rather than necessity. Others believe it was simply practical, cooler, quieter, and with fewer eyes. You wrap your toga tighter, then realize you're the only one still clothed. There's a gentle pressure, a quiet understanding. This is a space for skin, not fabric. You hesitate. A young capsarius, a bathhouse attendant, approaches with a knowing smile and a hand outstretched for your garment. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. You're here now. As you disrobe, the air feels both colder and warmer all at once. Cool on your shoulders, steamy near your face. Your feet are already damp, the soles of your sandals curling slightly as they dry and wet again with each step. The room glows faintly from the oil lamps resting in iron sconces. Their flames flutter each time someone walks past, leaving the space in a constant state of slow-motion shadow play. Someone has arranged fragrant herbs, probably mint and rosemary, near the entrance. A weak attempt to mask the ever-present tang of sweat and hot stone. A small statue of Venus watches over the basin in the center, her marble eyes impassive as if she's seen it all. Yes, it's late but not too late. The main door has just been barred from the outside. That doesn't mean no one else will come in. It just means you have to knock differently. Tonight's crowd is mixed, a retired centurion lounging with his head back, telling a story he doesn't want anyone to hear, a pair of merchants in whispered dispute over a shipping delay, a nervous scribe whose sandals are too new. You lower yourself onto a warm bench, steam curling around your legs. The heat wraps around you like wet wool. Your eyes close for just a moment, and the sounds of the bathhouse deepen. You're not sure if you're relaxed or slightly disoriented. And maybe that's the point. Because the night at the Thermae isn't just about hygiene or healing, it's about softening the sharp edges of Rome. Dulling ambition into drowsiness, washing power in hot water, blurring the lines between citizen and slave, desire and decorum, daylight and dream. You hear someone laugh again, this time a woman's voice, muffled by stone and steam. Were women allowed tonight? Officially no. But then again, a lot happens here that isn't official. You shuffle forward into the apoditorium, the changing room, your bare feet cold on the smooth stone before the heat swells again. The room is long and rectangular, its walls lined with shallow niches carved into polished marble. These hold a clutter of sandals, worn tunics, and personal trinkets, tossed in a way that suggests no one worries too much about theft, at least not yet. The oil lamps sputter along the walls, casting amber glows on slick floors and bare shoulders. This is the space where modesty comes to die quietly. No curtains, no stalls, no gentle euphemisms, just bodies in every stage of undress, moving in and out of the steam like ghosts with very visible tan lines. You hesitate. Again. You're not alone. A few others linger in the room, wrapping belts, adjusting togas, or standing idly with the quiet confidence of people used to being seen. You notice right away who's new and who's not. Veterans of the bathhouse move with a calm, bored elegance. Newcomers cling to their linens like they're on trial. A man next to you slips off his tunic with a practiced shrug, revealing a back marked with thin, pale scars, perhaps from battle, perhaps from business. He gives you a brief nod. That's the full conversation. Words are unnecessary here. The Roman world has rules for everything, including the art of being naked in public. This isn't some lawless strip fest. It's ritualized, normalized, quietly policed. You are expected to behave as though this is completely ordinary because in ancient Rome, it is. The baths are where senators, slaves, merchants, and musicians all pass through the same heat. The rules of social hierarchy do bend here, but they don't break. You place your folded garments into a vacant niche. You hope they'll still be there later. They probably will, unless someone takes a liking to your belt. Theft is rare but not unheard of. Historians still debate whether dedicated bathhouse thieves were an actual criminal class or just a convenient urban legend. Plaques on bathhouse walls sometimes warn of pickpockets and sandal snatchers, which is either a real concern or the most polite insult ever engraved in Latin. Now stripped down to your own awkwardness, you follow the glisten of steam deeper into the complex. But even here, in this supposedly transitional room, there's a surprising amount of lingering. People chat, lean against the walls, oil themselves up with bronze flasks of perfumed liquids. A man nearby is rubbing lavender oil into his thighs with the seriousness of a priest preparing an offering. Another is being attended to by a young servant who seems half asleep and fully unimpressed. You catch snippets of conversations. One about grain prices. One about a scandal involving a senator and a borrowed mule. One about the latest shipment of North African spices arriving in Ostia. These are the murmurs of empire, filtered through steam and bare skin. A surprising number of bathers wear jewelry. Not ostentatious chains or lavish rings, but subtle things, gold bracelets, simple pendants, bits of dyed string around the wrist. It's status signaling, yes, but also superstition. Small charms for luck, health, fertility. You even spot a phallic amulet, dangling cheerfully from a necklace. Romans weren't shy about their symbols. There's a small group in the far corner, 3 older men and a woman draped loosely in a light shawl. Officially, women bathed at different hours, but enforcement was inconsistent, especially at night. She laughs softly at something one of the men says. No one bats an eye. This late, rules are more like suggestions. You pick up the faint smell of smoke, sweet like cedar or pine. The heating fires are still burning behind the walls. Somewhere, a group of slaves is sweating even more than you are, stoking wood into the great furnaces beneath the floor, maintaining the hypocaust, the ancient underfloor heating system that makes all this possible. It's a miracle of engineering, and it sounds like a gentle, breathing dragon under your toes. Your skin begins to glisten with a fine sheen of sweat, even though you haven't entered the heated rooms yet. That's the point. The gradual acclimation. The Roman bath process is all about stages. Like a 7-step skincare routine, but with more politics. A man brushes past you, slick with oil, his towel slung over one shoulder. You notice a faint green tint to his skin, not illness, but perhaps a fancy new ointment made from crushed herbs and minerals. People brought their own blends, and some were borderline alchemical. One popular mixture included myrrh, wine sediment, and finely powdered glass. Yes, glass. Supposedly for exfoliation. Historians still argue whether that was a luxury treatment or just very bad science. The room is filling up. It's past the early part of the night now. The mood is thicker. Conversations are slower. A few people recline on the benches, half dreaming, half listening. You sit cross-legged on the warm stone and let yourself begin to melt. This isn't about bathing. Not yet. This is about shedding the city. Rome is loud, violent, overwhelming. But here, in this room filled with naked strangers and flickering light, you start to feel it slip away. You've barely settled into the warm air of the apoditorium before a Capsarius waves you forward with a flick of his wrist. He's lean, barefoot, and glistening with his own sweat, not from relaxing but from running this show. His linen tunic is stained and damp, but his expression is neutral, bordering on bored. He gestures toward a bench near a brass basin. Time for the oil and scraper ritual. You sit and the bench's heat seeps into your legs. The Capsarius produces a flask, bronze, dented but well cared for. Inside is olive oil, slightly warmed. Not the cooking kind, though people probably do use the leftovers for both. This one's mixed with a faint hint of something sharp, maybe mint or vinegar, possibly ashes. It's a custom blend, and tonight, it smells like the inside of a herb merchant's satchel. Without warning, he starts applying it to your skin. You flinch. It's both soothing and disconcertingly intimate. The oil is thick, slick, and a little gritty. It's not just about moisture. This is a full-body cleanser, massage oil, and modesty shield all in one. His fingers press into your shoulders and down your arms. Not gently. He's got places to be and people to scrape. The technique is efficient, less spa, more pit stop. But the effect is oddly hypnotic. You can feel your muscles, knotted from market noise and cobblestone walking, begin to unfurl. Once your arms and torso are oiled, he moves on to your back. A different man nearby is getting the same treatment, chatting lazily about a new wine shipment from Hispania. You try not to eavesdrop, but it's impossible. There's nowhere else to look. No murals, no birdsong, no modest distractions. Just humans, flesh, and echoing voices. Then comes the scraper. The strigil is a curved blade of bronze or iron, shaped like a flattened question mark. It's dull, thankfully, but firm enough to drag across your skin and pull away the oil, sweat, and dirt that's been baked into your pores all day. And let's be honest, it's gross. There's no delicate way to phrase it. What comes off you looks like greasy mud, but there's a weird satisfaction in watching it slide off. The Capsarius scrapes methodically, shoulders, arms, chest. You resist the urge to comment on the technique. He wouldn't appreciate feedback. He finishes one side, gestures for you to stand and turn. You do. More scraping. You've officially joined the long line of Romans exfoliated by strangers. Historians are still split on whether this was considered hygienic or purely symbolic. Some claim the oil merely redistributed grime, while others argue that without soap, this was the best they had. Either way, it was cultural gospel. You didn't question it. To skip the oil and strigil routine would be like walking into a dinner party and refusing to sit. It simply wasn't done. You glance at the pile of collected muck now sitting at the edge of the basin. There's no graceful way to dispose of it, so it's left there until an attendant wipes it away with a sour rag. It smells faintly of olives and effort. Nearby, another bather complains that the oil today feels thinner than usual. His friend agrees, claiming that last week, it was nearly luxurious. The Capsarius says nothing, but you catch the barest twitch of a smile on his lips. Maybe he waters it down on slow nights. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe both. A group of younger men, late teens, probably students, line up at the bench beside you. They're loud, teasing each other, elbowing ribs, daring each other to ask for extra mint in their oil. One does. The attendant obliges with exaggerated flair, flicking his wrist like a street performer. The others erupt in laughter. There's a familiarity here, a rhythm to it all, like they've done this weekly since they were children. They probably have. You remember that this isn't just a spa, it's a rite of passage. Boys come here to become men. Men come here to remember they're still alive. Some just come for the gossip. Everyone has their reason. And not everyone does this alone. Some have personal attendants, slaves or hired helpers, who oil them carefully and collect their clothes, keeping them folded and safe. You don't. But you spot one man whose servant is re-oiling a dry patch behind his shoulder with clinical focus. The man doesn't even turn his head, just raises a hand in thanks, then lets it drop like a fallen leaf. There's a whisper of commotion near the entryway. Two men are arguing over who gets to sit where. It's petty, but location matters. Benches closer to the heat are prized. So are ones in corners, less splash, more privacy. The argument fizzles when one of them is clearly recognized by others. Possibly a local magistrate. He gets the seat. The other man shrugs and walks away. Hierarchy reasserts itself without violence. Someone across the room is humming. The tune is unfamiliar, maybe a folk song from the provinces. It echoes strangely, bouncing off the wet marble. The sound mingles with the quiet rasp of metal on skin. It's almost meditative, if you forget what's actually happening. By the time your final scrape is done, you feel lighter, looser, almost new. The oil's been removed, mostly. You're shiny in some places, dry in others, but overall you're ready. The Capsarius nods, steps back, and gestures toward the next archway, where denser steam billows and torchlight dances. The caldarium awaits, the hot room. You stand, joints a little less stiff than before, and walk slowly toward the next threshold. Your skin tingles, your muscles ache in the good way, and you've just left a portion of yourself, quite literally, in the hands of a stranger. You pass beneath a low arch into the caldarium, the hottest chamber in the bathhouse, and your lungs seize for a second. The air is thicker than outside, heavy with steam and the sharp sting of mineral-soaked heat. You breathe shallowly at first. Everyone does. It's like walking into a damp kiln, except this kiln has benches and half-asleep merchants instead of pottery. Your skin is already slick from the oil ritual, but now every pore opens in surrender. Sweat beads instantly across your chest, then slides down your ribs in slow rivers. The floor beneath you is warm to the soles. Heated from below by the hypocaust, that massive underfloor oven system tended tirelessly by the unseen laborers on the lower level. Someone down there hasn't stopped shoveling wood since before sundown. A stone basin bubbles softly in the center of the room, steam ghosting up in elegant spirals. It's filled with near-boiling water, and a few brave souls are using it to splash themselves, or worse, sitting in it completely. You stare at them as if they've grown gills. They look entirely unbothered, maybe even smug. Clearly they've done this before. Benches line the walls, some marble, some wood, some with worn cushions so damp you're not sure if they started out dry. You choose one near the side and lower yourself slowly. Every inch of contact is a negotiation between body and stone. It's far too hot to be comfortable and far too good to resist. Across from you, two men are arguing in low tones about property lines near the Tiber. Their conversation is interrupted only when one of them lifts a cloth to wipe his face. It's less of a towel, more of a sacrificial offering at this point, utterly drenched, no longer useful, and definitely smells like yesterday's bath. But no one seems bothered. And here, discomfort is currency. The longer you can endure, the more legitimate your bathhouse cred becomes. The walls of the caldarium are tiled in small mosaics, mostly geometric patterns, a few sea creatures. One dolphin stares at you with the calm indifference of a creature who lives forever in this sweaty aquarium. You blink at it just long enough to feel your vision blur slightly from the heat. You lean back and let the sweat do its job. A slave enters with a ladle and pours water over a slab of stone near the fire vent. The hiss is immediate. A cloud of hot mist erupts into the room, greeted with groans and low chuckles. You wipe your brow and squint. Visibility drops. You can barely make out the figure across from you anymore, just a glistening silhouette framed in golden mist. This is where the real conversations happen. The caldarium is loud enough to mask intent but quiet enough to carry whispers. A man 2 benches over leans into his companion and mutters something with a glance toward the door. You catch only a few words: shipment, eastern docks, and no witnesses. You try not to look interested. You fail. Historians still debate whether the caldarium was a hub of political maneuvering or just a sweaty waiting room. There's evidence for both. Letters recovered from private homes describe bathhouse meetings that went far beyond polite chatter. But who's to say whether those meetings happened here in this furnace, or later over wine and figs? Your own thoughts begin to float. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the sound of dripping water from somewhere behind the wall, slow and rhythmic like a lullaby. A small part of your mind wonders if you'll ever cool down again. Then comes the sulfur. It's faint at first, like boiled eggs and wet metal, but soon unmistakable. Some caldaria had their waters drawn from nearby springs rich in minerals, healing they claimed. Smelly, you confirm. The Romans believed in the restorative powers of such baths, and to be fair, you can feel your shoulders loosening, your head lightening. Whether it's the sulfur or the steam-induced semi-consciousness is unclear. To your left, someone starts humming, a low, tuneless hum that blends weirdly well with the hiss of the steam and the occasional groan from someone who sat on a too-hot slab. The atmosphere is part opera, part oven. You try to stretch, raising your arms slowly, fingers brushing a warm jet of steam rising from the floor vent. You lower them again. That was ambitious. Very ambitious. The caldarium teaches humility. A new figure enters the room, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped only in a small towel that seems more decorative than practical. He surveys the room like a general checking troop formations, then sits opposite you. There's something about the way others glance at him, respectful, wary. You wonder who he is. A retired senator? A moneylender? A poet who knows a few dangerous people? You'll never know unless he decides you're worth noticing. He won't. Someone offers you a shallow cup of warm water. It's coppery and tastes vaguely like old pottery. You drink it anyway. Hydration isn't a luxury in here, it's survival. Every once in a while, a patron will rise suddenly and stumble out through the mist. No one stops them. The caldarium does not take prisoners, but it does test everyone who enters. You're sweating from your knees now, which you didn't know was possible. Time loses shape in the caldarium. There are no clocks, no natural light, only the internal ticking of your endurance slowly running down. A final hiss from the stone, a soft shuffle of sandals, and your Capsarius reappears at the edge of the steam. He nods once, an invitation or maybe a warning. You stand, legs slightly wobbly, and follow him out of the room. As soon as you pass the threshold, the air feels like a cool breeze, even though it's still uncomfortably warm by modern standards. You made it through. Congratulations. You're now steamed, scraped, and slightly suspicious of dolphins. Time for something gentler. The tepidarium welcomes you like a sigh. It's not exactly cool, but compared to the caldarium, it feels like slipping into a lazy Sunday afternoon. The heat is milder, softer, the air lighter. You breathe deeper. The sweat still beads, but slower now. The stone beneath your feet is warm instead of scorching. You can almost hear your body whispering thank you. This is where people linger. The tepidarium isn't just a transition room, it's the social core of the bathhouse. A place to slow down, stretch out, and engage in the true Roman pastime, conversation. Not the loud, boastful kind. Not here. The voices in this room are low, deliberate. Words float like steam, casual at first but layered with suggestion. You find a spot on a wide bench and sit with a contented grunt. The bench is curved just enough to cradle your spine, and someone at some point thought to place lavender in a nearby bowl. You breathe it in. It barely covers the underlying scent of oil, heat, and ambition, but it tries. Around you, the room begins to unfold like a novel. To your left, two older men are whispering behind raised hands. One is a retired legionary, if the sun-creased skin and squared shoulders are any indication. The other wears a gold ring with a seal stamp. Merchant, most likely. Their heads are close together. You catch part of a sentence. The harbor magistrate never saw it, and then it fades back into hushed tones. No one seems to notice. Or maybe they all do and pretend not to. A younger man walks by, followed by a boy carrying a wine jug. The wine sloshes lazily inside a terracotta pitcher, already sweating from the humidity. The boy pours a small cup, adds a splash of water, and hands it off. The man nods without making eye contact. He sits near the pool and drinks slowly, eyes half-lidded in thought. Business in the tepidarium is never announced. It's hinted, teased, folded into small talk. You hear someone joke about a missing tax scroll, and the response is a quiet chuckle and a knowing glance. Deals are planted like seeds here. The real harvesting happens outside the bathhouse, behind shuttered doors. The warmth of the room pulls at your muscles, softening you. Your arms hang looser, your jaw unclenches. Even your thoughts begin to slow down. This is by design. The Romans knew that people reveal more when they're relaxed, and what better way to encourage openness than a half-naked heat fog and some honeyed wine? Historians still argue whether the tepidarium's primary role was physical or political. Its architecture suggests both. The space is long, acoustically rich, and decorated more ornately than the hot or cold rooms. It's a theater for the soft power of whispers. Across from you, a woman, draped loosely in damp linen, leans back against a bronze bench, her ankles crossed, hair pinned with polished bone combs. Technically, she shouldn't be here. Or perhaps this is one of those evenings where rules were conveniently forgotten. No one looks surprised. A few glance her way, but not with scandal, just quiet interest. Her voice carries clearly as she speaks to a man beside her, low and smooth. You can't hear the words, but the cadence is unmistakably flirtatious. He laughs once, then covers his mouth with his cup. The boy with the wine jug returns to refill it. The woman smiles at him briefly, and even the boy seems to blush. Another man is getting a massage, face down on a wooden table near the wall. His back shines with oil, and the masseur is digging his thumbs expertly into tight shoulders. The man groans softly, not in pain, just in release. He says something about a debt collector he wants sorted by Saturn's day. The masseur hums an acknowledgement and keeps working. You stretch your legs, easing your feet onto a lower bench. The room is filled with soft motion. Servants carrying towels, a young couple tracing the edge of a mosaic with their fingertips, an old man gently snoring with his head resting on a folded cloak. For all its quiet, the tepidarium hums with intimacy. Not just the romantic kind, though there's plenty of that too, but a closeness born from shared sweat, communal heat, and the slow shedding of the day's armor. A soft splash echoes from a small side pool, barely big enough for 4 people. You glance over and see 3 men sitting shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed in conversation. One of them gestures toward his sandal on the floor, tapping it rhythmically as he talks. A coat? Maybe. Or maybe he just has a nervous tick. You're not sure which answer is more Roman. You lean your head back against the warm wall and let your eyes close for a moment. Somewhere nearby, someone's humming again, same person as before? You think so. The tune has no words, no melody you recognize, but it feels like it's always been part of this room. Then comes a voice, low, serious, confident. Are you looking for something? You open your eyes and glance sideways. A man is sitting beside you now. He wasn't there before, or maybe you just didn't notice. His gaze is direct but not aggressive. Curious maybe. He's older than you, well-groomed, and carries himself like someone used to being listened to. You're not entirely sure what he means. Could be literal, could be a proposition, could be something else entirely. You hesitate. He smiles faintly. Never mind, he says almost kindly and sips from his cup. He turns his attention elsewhere. Just like that, the moment fades. You're not sure what kind of moment it was. The tepidarium does that. It blurs things. Intentions become soft-edged, conversations meander, tension dissolves. Everyone here seems to float just above full awareness, drifting on waves of heat and quiet curiosity. You realize you've lost track of time again. Not that it matters. Someone coughs gently, and a servant enters with a tray of figs and cheese. The scent cuts briefly through the haze, sharp, salty, sweet. You're not hungry, but still, you reach for one. You're still tasting the fig when you feel it, that subtle prickling at the back of your neck. That sense of being watched. Not in an overt, dangerous way. More like you've just walked onto a stage without realizing it. Welcome to the unspoken theater of the Roman bathhouse, where half the sport is watching, and the other half is pretending you aren't. You glance around without moving your head. It's an old trick. Even now, with the room cloaked in gentle mist and murmuring voices, you can pick them out, the watchers. A man reclining with one arm lazily draped across the bench, eyes half closed but never blinking. A teenage boy who appears to be focused on his sandals, but who flinches every time someone walks by. An older woman in the corner, head tilted as if she's asleep, but whose foot taps slightly faster when a certain servant passes. Everyone sees and no one admits it. The Roman bathhouse is full of mirrors with no glass, reflections made of posture, of who greets whom, of whose tunic is neatly folded and whose is carelessly dropped. You notice these things now because you've learned how to look without looking. A group of men enters from the caldarium, glistening with sweat, talking louder than necessary. They settle in along the mosaic wall, their conversation half in jest, half in code. You hear a name you recognize, someone from the Senate, followed by a laugh that isn't entirely friendly. Now someone's watching you. You catch the glance this time. A young man, early 20s, elegant in the way only second sons of rich fathers tend to be. His skin is too smooth to have seen much labor. He's draped in a light linen that clings in the humidity. You look away politely. A moment later, when you glance back, he's still watching. You consider returning the gaze, but you don't. Instead, you lean forward and dip your hands into the shallow pool beside you. The water is pleasantly lukewarm, calming. Still, the feeling lingers. That quiet weight of attention. It's not paranoia. It's politics. In Rome, being noticed is power. But being noticed at the wrong moment? That's currency spent too soon. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were used as state surveillance tools, or just hotbeds of gossip that happened to benefit the right ears. But in practice, it hardly matters. When a senator's slave overhears a casual remark about military grain contracts, and that senator's vote mysteriously shifts the next day, well, maybe that was just coincidence. You move to a new bench. Quieter here. Less exposed. The light from the high windows is dimming. Outside, twilight must be settling in. A servant, balding, barefoot, with tired eyes, sets down a stack of fresh linen near the edge of the room. He doesn't look at anyone. Not directly. But he hears everything. You know this because he winces when someone makes a crude joke a little too loudly, and you catch him mouthing the next punchline under his breath. There's power in being invisible. To your right, two women enter quietly. One's older, with a commanding posture. The other follows closely behind. No one greets them, but no one asks them to leave either. They sit at the edge of the room, ankles crossed, sharing a cup of spiced wine. The younger one eyes the room carefully, head tilted like she's reading a page. Women weren't always allowed in public baths at night. But always is a flexible concept here. Sometimes the rules bend. Sometimes they snap altogether. You think back to a story you once heard, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, about an empress who disguised herself as a servant just to sit in on evening bathhouse conversations. She reportedly emerged the next morning knowing who was plotting against her, or at least who disliked the flavor of her birthday feast. Truth? Fiction? In Rome, they're often the same thing. You lie back again, arms spread across the stone bench, letting your body melt into the heat. You start to notice the acoustics of the room, how voices travel. A laugh from the far wall drifts like mist. A whispered endearment catches your ear, but you're not sure who said it or to whom. Then, a shuffle of movement behind you. You glance subtly and spot a short exchange, just two fingers brushing on a water jug handle. One man lets go, the other picks it up, but that touch, a fraction too long to be an accident. Signals. They're everywhere. There's a language in the bathhouse that doesn't exist outside it. Eye contact held for 3 seconds instead of 2. A towel folded a certain way. The direction someone's sandals face when they sit. A pause in conversation that opens space for an invitation, or closes the door on one. You wonder how many messages have passed through this room without a single word spoken. A boy walks in with a tray of burning herbs, something resinous and fragrant, maybe frankincense. He waves it gently near the corners, trying to freshen the air. A futile effort. This room has absorbed too much over the centuries. Too many secrets, too many glances, too much quiet tension. Still, he does his job. The smoke curls like a cat, winding around ankles and elbows. A sudden bark of laughter cuts through the air, louder than anything so far. Heads turn. A man, mid-40s, muscular, with an air of forced joviality, slaps the back of his companion and declares something about a missing goat. The joke falls flat. The companion smiles too quickly, too wide. You've seen this before. The laugh is a deflection. Someone in this room has power over him, and he's trying to remind everyone that he's comfortable, that he belongs. But he's trying too hard. You settle deeper into your seat, quietly observing. Because that's what this room is really for. Not bathing, not even relaxing. Watching, and pretending you aren't. The sandals are back. You notice them before you notice their owner. Soft leather, slightly worn at the heel, pointed just a little too directly at you. Last time they were beside the plunge pool. Now they're here, one bench over. Someone's orbit is shrinking. You pretend not to notice. Instead, you trail your fingers along the smooth curve of the marble beside you. The surface is cool in places, slick in others. Beneath your fingertips, the stone tells its own silent story, years of elbows, backs, and feet pressing down, leaning in, slipping, gripping. Somewhere under all the heat and oil, Rome has left a fingerprint. And just beside your hand, etched into the tile, a small fish. Not part of the larger mosaic. Not official. This one's scratched in by someone with time and a sharpened nail. It's facing sideways toward the corner of the room. A sign. A signature? Maybe something more. Because tonight, those signs are everywhere. You glance across the steam-draped chamber and spot a man tracing a spiral on the back of a wine cup. The person beside him nods, not in response to anything spoken, but to the gesture itself. Then they rise, slowly, casually. One walks east, one west. They vanish into the haze. And the sandals? Still there. This is what makes the Roman bathhouse so oddly hypnotic. It's less a building than a coded world. A public performance of privacy. The layers don't just peel back. They shimmer, revealing new dimensions the longer you stay. Take the mosaics, for instance. The large ones are decorative, sure. Neptune with his trident, dolphins leaping beside him, that sort of thing. But in a few corners, you see patterns that don't quite fit. A cluster of pine cones. A grapevine wrapped oddly tight. A rabbit mid-leap in a place rabbits don't belong. Some say these were just artistic flourishes. Others suggest they were signposts, clues for those in the know. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse was used as a coded meeting ground for lovers and allies. There's no official record, of course. Why would there be? But the spacing of benches, the use of patterned towels, even the absence of sandals by a particular archway, it all hints at a language designed for discretion. And now you feel it. That tingle behind the ribs. The one that says, something's about to happen. The sandals shift. He's approaching. Not directly, he's smarter than that. He rounds the perimeter of the room first, greeting someone here, exchanging a joke there. Always moving. Always casual. Until eventually he ends up beside you. And now you see him. A little older than you guessed. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Well-groomed beard. Tunic slung loosely across one shoulder. He smells faintly of cedar oil. His voice when he speaks is soft. Careful. Too warm tonight, he says with a smile that knows it isn't the heat making your pulse tick faster. You nod politely, non-committal. But you don't move, because you want to see how this plays out. He sits beside you, not close, but close enough. You're both facing forward, eyes on the flickering oil lamp set into the wall. For a moment, neither of you speak. Just the rustle of cloth and the sound of someone splashing lazily in the next room. And then he gestures, barely a flick of the fingers, toward the corridor that leads to the smaller chamber off to the right. The laconicum. Dry heat. Private space. You don't react, because that too is part of the dance. He doesn't ask again. Instead, he lets the moment hover. Then rises, not hurried, not slow, and walks away. And you're left with the weight of his sandals in your memory. There's no judgment here. That's the odd thing. Romans were many things, brutal, brilliant, bureaucratic, but they weren't particularly bothered by what happened behind closed doors or bathhouse curtains. So long as appearances were kept and social order respected, much was tolerated, even enjoyed. That's not to say everyone approved. Moralists like Seneca and Juvenal loved to sneer about what they claimed happened after dark. But moralists are rarely invited to the better parties. And besides, the bathhouse has always been many things at once. To some, it's a sanctuary. To others, a market. For you, tonight, it's a theater, and you're sitting front row. From the next room, a new sound, a low humming. A woman's voice, soft and rhythmic. Not quite singing, not quite chanting. The kind of sound that could be religious or seductive, or both. You rise, not to follow the man, not yet, but to stretch your legs, to let the room shift again around you. And as you pass that same corner from before where the two men parted ways, you notice something new. Someone has placed a small fig leaf, just barely wilted, on the lip of the basin. A sign, or just litter. That's the game, isn't it? You never really know. The floor is wet. Always. You step carefully, toes gripping the edge of each tile like a cat testing a rooftop after rain. Somewhere ahead, someone laughs, too loud, too sudden, and the sound bounces off the vaulted ceiling like a dropped amphora. The mood has shifted. Where earlier there was hushed steam and watchful glances, now there's chatter, movement, clinking. You've entered the unofficial fourth chamber of every Roman bathhouse, the snack zone. They don't call it that, of course. The Romans weren't exactly branding their grazing tables. But food has always been part of the experience. Especially after hours, when rules loosen and hands get greasier than they probably should in a public bathing facility. You pass a long bench lined with trays, ceramic plates and woven baskets perched on knee-high tables, offering a spread that would make a modern charcuterie board blush. Olives still glistening in brine. Cheeses soft and starting to melt at the corners. Honeyed almonds. Dates so sticky you could probably patch a roof with them. And wine. Always wine. Tonight it's warm. Poured from clay jugs the size of small toddlers, the drink smells of sun-thick grapes and something a bit stronger, maybe mulled with pepper or steeped with resin. One attendant hands you a cup with a grin, eyes already glassy from taste testing too many samples. You take a sip. It's sweet and earthy, like someone blended a vineyard and a forest floor. Not unpleasant, not refined, but definitely effective. Which, let's be honest, is the point. Because you're not the only one feeling relaxed. A group of young men are playing a light game of dice near the edge of the tepidarium. Each throw is punctuated by a theatrical groan or cheer. Every now and then, a chunk of bread goes airborne. No one minds. That's how you know the wine's working. And then there's the musician. He's seated on a short stool, bare legs crossed, lyre perched in his lap like a sleepy cat. He strums without much urgency, plucking a slow, almost hypnotic tune that winds its way through the steam like ivy on old stone. He doesn't sing, doesn't need to. The melody hums its own lyrics. Something about midnight, about heat, about not going home quite yet. You lean against a column and let it all wash over you. The sounds, the smells, the low murmur of 50 conversations you're not part of and don't need to be. This is the beauty of the Roman bathhouse. You can drift. No one will stop you. Well, almost no one. Try this, says a voice to your left. You turn and a young woman, barely out of her teens if that, offers you a skewer. On it, something unidentifiable and golden brown, still steaming. Fried? Roasted? Maybe both. You raise an eyebrow. It's dormouse, she says. Fatty little thing. Stuffed with pine nuts. Still warm. You take it because refusing a dormouse in a Roman bathhouse feels like bad luck. The meat is soft, richer than you expect. Nutty. Greasy. You're not sure you like it, but it does pair oddly well with the wine. She watches your reaction with amusement, then drifts off toward the dice game, skewer in hand like a wand. This is what night at the baths does to people. It blurs the lines. Strangers offer food. Musicians play lullabies no one asked for. And people walk barefoot across marble floors like they've never known shame. Historians still argue whether Roman bathhouses truly functioned as social equalizers or just pretended to. Technically, anyone could attend so long as they paid the small fee. But in practice, the wealthy got better towels, cleaner basins, and nicer seating. Still, on nights like this, with the air thick with laughter and fig leaves and oil, class feels more like a rumor than a rule. And yes, someone just slipped on the floor. You see him go down in slow motion, feet out, arms flailing, a faint squeak of surprise as his hip finds the corner of a low bench. He doesn't yell. He laughs. So does everyone nearby. A man hands him his goblet, still half full. The musician doesn't even miss a beat. But the danger is real. These floors are polished limestone and waterlogged towels and scattered olive pits. Slipping isn't a matter of if, it's when. Maybe that's why no one's in a rush. Rushing would be a death wish. Instead, you continue on, steps slow, letting the heat and the food settle into your joints. A woman beside you tips her head back and pours wine straight from the jug into her mouth. Some of it lands in her hair. She doesn't seem to care. You don't either. Because at this point, the bathhouse isn't just a place anymore. It's a mood, a ritual, a kind of drowsy communion shared through steam and snacks and sidelong glances. You find a small stool in a quieter corner and sit. The lyre tune fades, replaced now by a poet reciting something dramatic about the moon and betrayal. It's a bit over the top, but you let it wash over you anyway. Someone passes you a fig. You take it without looking. You're not sure who offered it. It's sweet. Too sweet. But exactly right. The lyre has gone quiet, but its echo lingers in your head like the last breath of a dream. In its place now, the soft thrum of voice, rhythmic, confident, theatrical. A man stands on a platform not much larger than a dinner table, lit from behind by an oil lamp that casts his shadow 10 feet tall on the misted wall. He's quoting Ovid, of course. Because bathhouse entertainment isn't just about music or flirtation, it's also about performance. Especially after dark, when the mood tilts toward the indulgent and the Romans, those ever-so-eternal dramatists, begin to crave spectacle. This particular performer is tall, thin, and utterly committed to his craft. He weaves his hands in sweeping motions, words spilling from him like he's conducting a storm, not merely reciting verse about jealous gods and overly emotional nymphs. Around him, half-dressed bathers lounge on cushions and benches, some nodding along, others pretending not to watch but clearly listening. You find a seat nearby, towel still damp, fingers sticky with dried fruit syrup from the fig someone handed you earlier. Someone else's elbow rests casually against your back. No one apologizes. In the bathhouse, personal space is more of a suggestion. The poet's voice rises, hits a passionate pitch about Venus weeping in the waves, and then drops to a whisper. You realize this is the fourth performer you've heard tonight. Earlier, there was a girl juggling clay cups near the changing room, humming as she did. And before that, a man balancing upside down on a stool while someone threw grapes at him. Yes, bathhouses sometimes had jugglers. And poets. And musicians. And bored senators attempting amateur monologues between sweat sessions. What? Because the Romans couldn't help themselves. They turned everything into theater. Entertainment wasn't scheduled. Just happened. If someone felt like reciting Virgil, they did. If someone else had a flute or a lute or just an impressive singing voice and too much wine, they stood up and shared it. Bathhouses, especially the big public ones in cities like Rome or Carthage, became breeding grounds for spontaneous art. Some sublime, some downright awful, all completely human. A slave boy nearby is attempting to beatbox with a reed flute. It's not working. He knows it. Everyone knows it. But nobody tells him to stop. You smile into your cup. Historians still argue whether professional performers were formally hired for nighttime bathhouse hours or whether they simply showed up, knowing the audience would be warm, relaxed, and slightly inebriated. Most agree it was a mix. Some were paid, many were not, and a few probably just really liked attention. The man beside you chuckles as the poet now reenacts a thunderclap with a dramatic clap of his hands and a loud boom. A fig rolls off someone's plate. A woman yawns and stretches, her jewelry clinking softly in the warm air. There's a rhythm to it all, a lazy pulse. It's not just entertainment, it's ambience. But not all performances are artistic. You notice two men near the cold bath engaged in a slow, gentle wrestling match. Not angry, not loud. Just competitive, playful. It's unclear if they're showing off or flirting or both. Probably both. You look away because that seems polite, only to find yourself watching a different kind of act. A man massaging another's shoulders while softly singing a lullaby in Greek. The recipient appears to be halfway to sleep. Not everyone performs, of course. Some just observe. Some doze. One older woman appears to be playing a counting game with river stones, completely oblivious to the growing crowd around the poet. And every now and then, someone says something funny enough that the entire room laughs at once. One of those deep, sudden, helpless laughs that feels like it comes from the gut more than the chest. You laugh too, even though you didn't catch the setup. The performer bows. People clap, slap thighs, click tongues. He offers a small speech, something about beauty and heat and poetic destiny, and steps down. No one replaces him. Not immediately. Instead, silence creeps in. The kind that isn't truly silent but filled with water dripping, soft breathing, the rustle of fabric, and the muffled splash of someone easing into the frigidarium. It's peaceful. Then a drumbeat. Soft but persistent. You glance toward the sound. It's a hand drum played by a child, maybe 10 or 11, seated cross-legged on a towel, tapping out a slow, syncopated rhythm. No one asked for it. No one told him to stop. He plays for himself. You close your eyes. Let it all blend together. You think about how strange it is, this space where everyone's half naked and half drunk and half asleep, yet nothing feels dangerous. Not really. The worst threat tonight is slipping on a wine-soaked olive pit or having to listen to one more overacted myth. Still, you keep one eye open because bathhouse nights are never completely predictable. They're soft, yes, but also alive, fluid, loose around the edges like a dream just before waking. The drumbeat fades. Someone sneezes. You lean back, towel beneath your head, the scent of oil and citrus in your nose. Somewhere in the distance, another voice begins to rise. Maybe another poem. Maybe a confession. Maybe the start of something less rehearsed. You smile again. Because this bizarre blend of skin and poetry and fruit and music is exactly why people came to the bathhouse after dark. Not for cleanliness, but for company. You're still lounging when a sudden hush moves through the room, like a wave that forgets how to crash. Something's changed. Subtle but definite. A woman enters. Not as a slave girl bringing towels. Not as a servant fetching oil. But as a bather, chin lifted, eyes calmly scanning the room. And just like that, the mood shifts. Not scandalous. Not even that unusual, depending on the hour, the district, the politics of the day. But noticeable. Because in the Roman world, who was allowed in the bathhouse, and when, was a dance of shifting boundaries enforced by law, tradition, and convenience. Gender in these spaces wasn't fixed. It was fluid like the water everyone was soaking in. She walks across the stone floor, her sandals clicking, her tunic loose at the shoulders. Two younger women follow. No one stops them. No one stares exactly. But people glance. Then glance again. You glance. So does the poet. Here's the thing. Women did use Roman baths. Frequently. Especially in larger cities, especially in wealthier districts, especially during daylight hours. But after dark? That was murkier. Historians still argue whether mixed-gender bathing was common, discouraged, or secretly encouraged with a wink and a nudge. Roman law shifted constantly on this point. Augustus famously banned it. Later emperors relaxed the rules. Still later, some cracked down again, though often with loopholes big enough to drive a chariot through. And even when technically banned, it happened. Because Romans were practical, and rules had a funny way of bending around desire. You watch the women move past, heading toward the tepidarium. One gives a little laugh as her foot slips. Her friend catches her arm. They disappear into the mist, trailing the scent of lavender oil and something sharper, maybe vinegar or citrus peel. A man next to you murmurs something under his breath, but no one responds. He's not angry. just narrating the moment as Romans often did, like turning life into a casual epic. You sit up, stretching your legs. When women came to the baths, it changed things. The atmosphere thickened. The glances got more careful, or more brazen. Sometimes it was flirtation. Sometimes rivalry. Other times just plain curiosity. After all, everyone was here for the same reasons: warmth, comfort, gossip, relief. But the presence of women in a space that often blurred the line between hygiene and pleasure? That stirred things. You ease into a nearby tub and close your eyes. Around you, the conversations shift pitch. Laughter takes on a new tone, lighter or maybe more performative. In some cities, women had their own separate bathhouses, fully apart from the men's. In others, they had separate hours. Early morning, perhaps, while the streets were still empty and the furnace hadn't yet warmed the water to boiling. Some records mention women paying extra for exclusive time. Others tell of courtesans bribing guards for late-night access. And then there were the truly daring, those who walked right in, heads held high, daring anyone to object. That's who these three remind you of. Not timid wives hoping no one saw them. Not careful matrons peeking around corners. But confident night-goers who knew exactly what they were stepping into. A fringe anecdote bubbles up in your memory. Something about Empress Poppaea, Nero's second wife, ordering a private marble bathhouse to be constructed for her alone, because the public one smelled of other people's ambition. You smile at that. Meanwhile, one of the younger women emerges from the mist again, cheeks flushed from the steam, hair curling wildly. She catches you looking and doesn't look away. Instead, she raises one brow, barely, and disappears again into the warmth. You sink a little lower into the water. Tonight, the gender lines are less rules and more suggestions. The baths have always been like this. One moment, strict and separated, the next, tangled and playful. Romans weren't consistent, and they weren't ashamed of that inconsistency. Some days, a magistrate would fine a bath owner for letting women in during the wrong hour. The next day, that same magistrate would sneak in with a lover under his cloak. What mattered more than rules was discretion, and the ability to pretend you hadn't seen what you definitely saw. You glance at the far wall where an old mosaic depicts Venus rising from the sea, hair coiled like seafoam. She's surrounded by dolphins, one of which is absolutely winking. You think about how many centuries of bathers have stared at that exact dolphin, probably wondering if it's supposed to be seductive. A voice murmurs in Greek behind you. A soft laugh follows. Another splash. The water's warm but not hot enough to dull your senses. You're aware, suddenly, vividly, of how layered this place is. Marble and steam, skin and voice, tradition and impulse. The women return, this time with a tray of sweets and something in a small ceramic cup. You catch the scent of cardamom. One of them sets the tray down in the middle of the floor and sits cross-legged beside it, robe pulled loosely across her chest. She begins telling a story. You don't catch all of it, just enough to know it's about a merchant, a missing coin, and a suspiciously handsome sailor. Her voice is low and textured, made for this kind of night. And everyone listens. Because whether they bathed separately or together, in marble palaces or in cramped neighborhood rooms, Romans loved stories. Especially when told by someone still glowing from steam and confidence. You let your eyes close again. The warmth pulls at your limbs. The story fades in and out like music. And somewhere inside the fog of your thoughts, you realize this moment, quiet, charged, strange, is exactly the kind of memory that lingers. The kind you forget how to explain but never quite forget. You stretch your arms and glance around, finally fully aware of something you've half noticed all evening. Everyone here is naked, but no one is equal. Not even close. You may have stepped into the bathhouse as just another body, but status still clings to the air like the scent of old oil in the tiles. At first glance, the bathhouse seems democratic. Men of every class rub shoulders in the steam, their clothes discarded, their titles left at the door. Senators sit beside stonemasons. Slaves scrub the backs of freedmen. Everyone bathes in the same water. But as you look again, the signs are everywhere. That man with the smooth skin and delicately plucked eyebrows? He's not just vain, he's wealthy. Only someone with a team of servants and time to spare could maintain that kind of grooming. His ring glints as he lifts a cup of watered wine. Real gold, not bronze washed to shine. Across the way, another bather lounges on a personal cushion. Yes, a cushion. In a bathhouse. It's embroidered. You can bet that didn't come from the common stalls outside. There's even an attendant fanning him slowly with a palm frond fan. Indoors. At night. With steam rolling over everything. But no one questions it. Because even in a place where everyone sweats the same, status whispers through the heat. You spot it in jewelry, an anklet on a highborn youth, subtle but deliberate. In who gets the freshest towels. In whose sandals are neatly arranged versus kicked into a pile. Historians still argue whether Roman bathhouses were truly classless sanctuaries or carefully curated mirrors of the outside world. There are records of emperors dining in bathhouses, mingling with citizens, but always flanked by guards, always sitting in the best-lit corners. One emperor, Commodus, reportedly had an entire bath suite reserved for his pet leopard. You haven't seen any big cats tonight. Just a few strutting egos. And yet, there's more to this hierarchy than money. There's also presence. The quiet confidence of someone who knows how to command attention while barely moving. That poet from earlier? His tunic was threadbare, but the way people leaned in to hear him? That's status too. You glance at your own hands, pruned and flushed. You're somewhere in the middle, probably. Not important enough for fan service. Not invisible enough to ignore. Just present. You shift seats and instantly feel the difference. The marble here is warmer. Not by much, but enough. Someone had this seat before you, someone with servants, maybe. It's cleaner. Smoothed by repeated use and probably wiped more often than the others. You lean back. Luxury by association. In a shadowy corner, an older man is grumbling. His stool was stolen, he says. He paid a boy to guard it. The boy vanished. Now his backside is cold and he's threatening to file a complaint with the bathhouse manager. A few bathers roll their eyes. One chuckles. That's another layer of this place. Petty power games. There are bathhouse politics, unspoken rules about when to arrive and where to sit. Who you talk to and who you pretend not to see. You overhear one man boasting about being recognized by the Edile last week in the Palestra, while another casually mentions a dinner with a client who's extremely well connected. Even nudity doesn't cancel hierarchy. It just reveals where the lines actually live. You remember a fringe tidbit from a scroll you read once. Some Romans would deliberately bathe in slightly cheaper districts, not because they couldn't afford better, but because being the most impressive person in a smaller pond felt sweeter than blending in with true elites. Tonight, you're surrounded by a mix. Modest men trying to pass, rich men trying not to look bored, poets trying to get noticed, and slaves trying not to get in the way. And then there are the workers. They're the ones with red hands and steady expressions. You notice one refilling the oil basin, barely acknowledged by the wealthy bather he's kneeling beside. Another is scraping the walls with a curved bronze brush, his eyes half-lidded with fatigue. He's been here since dusk, and he'll still be here after you've gone home and collapsed into bed. One of them catches your eye as he rinses a bucket. He doesn't smile, but he nods. You nod back. Not everyone has the luxury of pretending they're all the same here. Still, the illusion persists. Romans loved the idea of shared rituals, the bath, the meal, the market. They believed in public life. And in some ways, the bathhouse really is the closest Rome gets to equality. After all, nobody gets to keep their clothes on. But the moment the water dries and the sandals are laced again, the world resumes its sorting. Titles return. Privileges reassert themselves. The man with the warm marble seat might step into a litter outside, carried home on the shoulders of 4 sweating slaves. The boy who wiped the floors will be scrubbing sandals until dawn. And you? You'll leave knowing that for a few hours, you sat in a strange limbo. Half naked, half anonymous, surrounded by naked ambition. You close your eyes again. Someone pours more water onto the brazier. Steam rushes up, thick and sudden. A poet begins humming again. And you remember something one of them said earlier, half in jest. In the bathhouse, we are all equals, until the towels arrive. You're still lounging in that warm patch of marble when something sharp interrupts the trance-like rhythm of the bathhouse. Not a voice, not a scream, just a clatter. Metal on stone. Then a long wet sigh. The cleanup crew has arrived. The mood shifts slightly, like the water around you adjusting to a new body entering the pool. Most bathers stay relaxed, but a few begin to gather their things. The hour is late. The torches burn lower now, flickering instead of roaring. And here come the men with buckets, brushes, and vinegar. Yes, vinegar. Turns out, Roman bathhouses weren't just about indulgence. They were a logistical nightmare. Hundreds of bodies, oil-coated and sweaty, leave behind an absolute mess. The oil alone builds up on the marble surfaces into a slick film that could fell an emperor if he stepped too quickly. So after dark, the cleanup begins. You decide to linger. Watch. Learn. A young man with strong arms and a permanent scowl begins scrubbing the caldarium walls with a bundle of rough twigs dipped in acetic acid. His nose wrinkles every few seconds. That pungent, eye-watering smell? A sign that vinegar is cutting through a day's worth of sweat, dead skin, and oil. It doesn't help that people are still in the bathhouse while this is happening. Romans didn't wait for total emptiness. The cleaners worked around the remaining guests, quietly, quickly, and often barefoot. Some bathers pretended not to see them. Others barked orders. One man you've seen before, the one with the embroidered cushion, is now complaining that the scent of cleaning agents is ruining the mood. The cleaner ignores him. He's heard it before. Scrubbing marble is one thing, but cleaning out the drainage grates? That's another story. A small boy in a short tunic is tasked with scooping out the grate at the edge of the tepidarium, and the face he makes suggests something truly awful has lodged there. He yanks it out with a wooden ladle and drops it into a bucket with a satisfying squish. No one claps. No one thanks him. He just moves on. Historians still argue whether Roman bathhouses followed strict sanitation codes or operated mostly on social expectations and occasional oversight. Some records suggest bathhouses were checked regularly by officials, while others hint at a far more chaotic system, where only public complaints sparked real action. What's clear is that the people cleaning the place rarely got credit and almost never got sleep. One particularly odd tidbit? In some cities, bathhouse cleaners were hired from a very specific slave caste, supposedly impervious to smells. Whether that's myth or just something Roman aristocrats like to believe is debatable. But here they are, scrubbing, scraping, pouring hot water over the steps to dislodge the sticky remnants of oil and herbs and old soap. One worker even burns a handful of dried bay leaves over a small brazier, letting the scented smoke drift through the air like a makeshift incense. It smells faintly of kitchens and temples. You shift your weight and realize your once smooth marble seat is now slightly damp and vinegar-scented. The cleaner catches your eye again. He doesn't smile, just raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Still here?" You nod sheepishly. Nearby, someone has left a broken sandal. One of the workers picks it up and inspects the torn strap. Then, instead of tossing it, he tucks it into a cloth satchel at his side. Reusable leather, maybe. Or maybe he's just tired of waste. There's a whisper now among the few remaining bathers. Someone lost a ring. Gold, he says. He remembers taking it off before the steam room. Panic is spreading like a dropped towel in the plunge pool. The workers exchange glances. Finally, one of them, a wiry man with a crooked nose, reaches into his pocket and holds up the ring. No reward is offered. No thanks is given. The man simply takes it back and walks off. Another small truth. The bathhouse may be full of rituals and relaxation, but once the olive oil dries and the lights dim, what's left is sweat, labor, and other people's trash. The late-night crew knows this. They see what others choose not to: the discarded garlands, the half-eaten figs, the hastily forgotten towels that smell suspiciously like perfume and wine. And they deal with it all night after night. You watch as they refill the oil jugs, restack the clean towels. One man is carefully scrubbing a spot on the mosaic floor that seems to resist all attempts at purification. He mutters something under his breath. Maybe a curse. Maybe a prayer. There's a kind of poetry in their movements. A rhythm. They work quietly but together. No wasted energy. No chatter. Just the soft swish of water, the occasional grunt, and the vinegar stinging your nose. You shift again. The floor is getting wet, and the cleaner with the broom is slowly making his way toward your feet. Time to move. You nod at the crew as you step away, and one of them gives the faintest nod back. An acknowledgement, maybe. A silent thanks for not making more mess. You pass the central pool, now quieter, calmer. The echoing laughter has faded. The musicians are gone. Only the cleaners remain, working in the damp glow of dying torches, slowly reclaiming the space from the excesses of the day. And just before you exit, you see it, a forgotten bracelet tucked into the corner of a bench. Delicate. Silver. Someone will come looking. But maybe not tonight. You're halfway through the arched corridor, drying off your arms with what's left of a damp towel, when a quiet rustle makes you stop. It's not the usual shuffle of bathhouse staff, or the sleepy lapping of water. No, this is a different sound. Swift, nervous, purposeful. You peek back into the shadowed corner near the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, where the steam thins and the marble floor glows faintly in torchlight. Two figures are pressed close together, talking low, glancing around. One holds a small cloth pouch that rattles when shaken. The other nods once, tucks the pouch into his tunic, and disappears toward the side exit. You've just witnessed a trade. Not unusual in a Roman bathhouse. In fact, commerce here was practically expected, whether that meant exchanging gossip, favors, or actual coin. But something about this exchange felt different. Faster. Heavier. There's a reason Roman law codes mention bathhouses almost as much as temples and forums. They were places of business, sure, but also of secrets. With so many people stripped of their outer layers, clothing, titles, pretenses, the line between public and private blurred quickly. And that blur made crimes almost invisible. You continue walking, slower now, keeping an ear open. Behind a curtain near the changing room, two slaves are whispering about a missing bracelet. Again silver, again forgotten. But this time, one of them swears he saw someone pocket it. The other just shrugs. Who's going to report it? The bracelet's owner left hours ago. Petty theft was so common in Roman bathhouses, it became a joke. A few graffiti scrawls near Pompeii's ruined baths read things like, "I came for a wash, I left with one sandal," or "Beware the towel thief, he's quick and shirtless." You can't help but smirk. Some things never change. But not all crimes were harmless. Historians still debate just how dangerous Roman bathhouses were after dark. Some sources insist they were relatively safe, well-lit, full of staff, frequented by powerful men with guards. Others, though, point to shady dealings, sudden disappearances, and even murder. The kind that didn't make it into public records. The kind that involved people too influential to name. You pass a side alcove, empty now but still damp. An odd smell lingers there. Not vinegar, not oil. Something metallic. You pause, peer closer. A cracked tile lies half hidden under a wooden bench, its red edges darkened with age. Was it wine? Or something thicker? One of the attendants spots you and hurries over, broom in hand. "Slippery there," he mutters, brushing water toward a drain that doesn't seem to drain much at all. You nod and move along. Back near the entrance, you notice a small stone shrine tucked into the wall, an offering to Fortuna, goddess of luck. Several coins rest at her feet, along with a dried fig and what looks like a hastily folded prayer. Roman bathhouses often had these little shrines, partly for decor, partly for peace of mind. It was said Fortuna watched over dice games, business deals, and perhaps the darker moments too. Speaking of dice games, you round the corner and spot a cluster of men squatting near a bench, a board scratched into the marble between them. They're using knucklebones to gamble. Technically illegal in most public spaces. Absolutely common in practice. Your luck's drying up faster than your back. One man laughs, pointing at his opponent's dwindling pile of coins. Another man, clearly losing, looks less amused. He rolls again. Loses again. The tension rises. One hand twitches toward his belt. You sense that something could happen here, something beyond a bad throw. But just then, a bather walks between them, trailing water, muttering about needing another towel. The moment dissolves. No confrontation. At least not yet. You breathe again. There were rumors, of course. Not just theft and gambling. Occasionally, people whispered about disappearances. Merchants who entered the baths but never left, or love affairs that ended abruptly. Some said bodies had been found in the hypocaust tunnels beneath the floor, left there to bake slowly under the heated slabs. Was that real? Was it myth? Historians still argue whether any such cases were covered up by the wealthy or invented entirely to spice up Roman gossip. What's undeniable is that bathhouses sat at the intersection of pleasure and danger, a place where trust was suspended along with your sandals. And sometimes crime took subtler forms. Extortion, for instance. You pass a man draped in a damp robe whispering into another's ear. A nod. A coin. A threat? You can't tell. But the second man leaves hurriedly, shoulders tense. Even the baths themselves were tied up in politics. Landowners competed to build the most lavish ones. Governors funneled tax money into renovation projects that somehow tripled in cost. Favors were traded in the tepidarium. Allegiances formed beside the massage benches. By now, the bathhouse has emptied even more. The echo of footsteps is rare. And yet, that quiet hum persists, not just the water but the whisper of what's left behind. Secrets. Exchanges. Absences. One final curiosity. As you near the exit, you spot a carved tablet mounted just above the doorframe. Latin script, worn with age. It reads something like, "Let no one leave unwashed in body or in soul." A noble sentiment. A gentle nudge toward purity. But after everything you've just witnessed, you're not sure how seriously to take it. You're almost out. The torches have burned low, the tile underfoot is cooler, and a few attendants are snuffing out lanterns with long hooks. But something tugs at you, a strange curiosity you can't quite shake. It began when the breeze shifted back near the cold room and you thought you heard footsteps. Not the heavy slap of sandals or the shuffle of slaves. Something softer, bare, careful, and oddly out of sync with the visible crowd. You glanced back toward the frigidarium, its water still and glassy under the final torchlight, and there it is again. The faintest pad of movement, then silence. You edge back, slowly, quietly, because this, after all, is a Roman bathhouse after dark, and the night has a way of reanimating things left behind. It isn't just your imagination. The Romans believed bathhouses were haunted. And really, can you blame them? Places where hundreds of people shed clothes, sweat, secrets, and lives, where whispered affairs, sudden deaths, and quiet crimes happen behind veils of steam? That's prime real estate for lingering spirits. The belief wasn't just folklore. Roman poets, even upper-class authors like Pliny the Younger, occasionally mentioned bathhouse hauntings. Not dramatic ones with chains and moaning, but eerie sounds, sudden chills, shadows where none should be. You round the mosaic arch into the frigidarium, half expecting a joke, maybe another bather playing tricks. But there's no one there. Just that faint echo of dripping water and your own breathing. Then you notice it. Near the edge of the plunge pool, a faint outline on the marble floor. Not a towel. Not a robe. It's darker. Stained. Ancient. You crouch. The stain isn't fresh, probably centuries old, but it feels recent in this light, in this hour. Was it wine spilled during a party long gone? Or something heavier? No one will ever know for sure. And somehow that's worse than the truth. There's an old Roman superstition that souls who die suddenly in places of pleasure, baths, theaters, brothels, linger longer than others. Perhaps they're confused, unwilling to accept death in the midst of indulgence. Perhaps they're simply not ready to leave. To counteract this, some bathhouses were built with small altars or niches. Others had charms hidden in the structure, bits of bone, hair, carved protective symbols. Even a few cursed tablets. These weren't placed on enemies but against them, meant to protect the bathers from spirits or bad luck. Like supernatural insurance policies. Historians still debate whether these charms were widespread or isolated quirks of anxious provinces. But archaeological digs have turned up enough bone fragments, miniature figurines, and buried inscriptions that something was going on beneath all that marble. And then there's the frigidarium itself. Cold, still, death-like. Romans often compared it to the river Styx, a boundary between the heated, lively world and something quieter, more eternal. You've slipped your foot in without thinking. The water bites instantly. Sharp, clean in contrast to the warm mist still clinging to your skin. It's a jolt like crossing through to the other side. And for a moment, your breath catches, not from cold but from the eerie stillness. Time folds in on itself here. You could be in 2025 or 25 CE. The marble wouldn't know the difference. Behind you, one of the attendants clears his throat gently. He's not looking at you, he's looking behind you, over your shoulder. You turn. Nothing. Just a statue of a nymph in a half-sheltered alcove, her hands cupped forever in the act of pouring invisible water into a chipped basin. But still, you feel it. That hum again. A presence. Or maybe it's just your heartbeat. He nods toward the exit. Time's up. You step out of the frigidarium, toweling off quickly. The cold clings to you like a second skin. As you walk past the statue, you swear the basin is wetter than it should be. But maybe that's condensation. Or maybe the goddess poured something out after all. Roman society didn't take hauntings lightly. People called in priests, used rituals, burned herbs like frankincense and myrrh to cleanse spaces, especially ones like bathhouses, where the line between sacred and profane blurred easily. The temples had rules. The baths had rumors. Even Cicero, stern-faced as ever, once mentioned the uneasy feelings a person might get late at night in the darker corners of a bath complex. And he wasn't exactly a fan of ghosts. You make your way back through the dim hallway. The murals along the walls are harder to read now. Were they always this faded? You could have sworn there was a lion in that fresco earlier, but now it looks more like a woman in a headdress. The shapes shift. Or maybe your mind's doing that thing minds do when they're tired and overstimulated. Still, one part of you wonders who else walked here at this exact hour 100 years ago. 1,000. Did they feel the same draft down their spine? Did they hear the same faint echoes? It's strange. You came for a bath. You're leaving with a story you're not quite sure you believe. But you'll remember this feeling. Especially tonight. Especially when your house creaks softly in the wind. You step into the last heated chamber before dawn, a place caught somewhere between comfort and closure. The laconicum, they call it. A dry, oven-like room warmed by the lingering fire that's been stoked since dusk. The air isn't as punishing as it was earlier, it's more forgiving now, softer. Like the bathhouse itself is exhaling after a long, sweaty night of hosting secrets. You sit on the warm stone ledge. Not hot, not cold, just right. This is where the final bathers always drift. You're not alone, but no one's talking anymore. Just the occasional throat clear, or the scrape of a sandal being dragged across tile. A man near the far wall leans against the stone like it's the side of a ship, half asleep. A servant yawns into his palm. Even the whispering has stopped. Whatever drama unfolded tonight is sealed for another cycle of sunrise and denial. This place, like most Roman bathhouses, isn't just about cleanliness. It's about ritual, completion. You came in dirty, uncertain, maybe a little wound up. And now, you're quieter, calmer. Maybe still carrying a few ghost stories, sure, but lighter somehow. Funny thing is, the Romans didn't bathe at night out of necessity. They did it out of preference. For the rich, it was the final indulgence of the day. For the poor, it was a window into a world where they could walk the same marble, sweat in the same heat, float in the same pools as senators and generals. Nakedness erased a few class lines. Not all, but some. And here, in this sleepy oven, everyone's equal in exhaustion. The stone behind you hums with warmth. Not heat. Not anymore. The fire's dying down in the furnace below, the hypocaust, its hidden belly having done its job. Somewhere behind a locked door, a slave is adding one last log, out of habit more than necessity. Historians still argue whether nighttime bathing was more common among the upper or lower classes. Some say only the elite could afford such luxury. Others argue it was the laborers coming off their shifts who truly filled the baths at these hours. The truth is probably both, and neither. Roman society, like its plumbing, was complicated and often full of contradictions. And here you are, perched on its tiled remains. You lean back, eyelids heavier than before, tracing the ceiling's fading fresco. Birds in flight. A vine curling endlessly. At some point tonight, you stop thinking about time. You stop thinking about being modern. The bathhouse does that. It folds the centuries like laundry. You can't remember what year it is. You're not sure it matters. One bather stands and heads to the apoditerium. You watch him go, slow steps, towel dragging like a tail. That'll be you in a few minutes. But not yet. Because right now you're still wrapped in it. The scent of smoke and lavender oil, the afterhum of voices you didn't quite hear, the slick residue of oil and old stories on your skin. You close your eyes. Let yourself drift. They say the final plunge before sunrise was a kind of Roman prayer. Not spoken aloud, of course. Just felt. A ritual cleansing of whatever happened in the dark. A way to carry only steam and stillness into the waking world. You rise. One last time. No ceremony. No farewell. Just a towel over the shoulder and the cool stone under your feet as you step into the changing room. The moonlight hits the floor through a high window. Dust hangs in the beam like incense smoke. You dress slower than before. The city outside is still asleep, or maybe just beginning to stir. A bread seller rolling out his cart. A temple priest preparing incense. A thief melting into shadows. Life continues, but you're in that narrow sleep and waking history and now. As you tie your sandals, you glance one last time at the dark hallway behind you. The marble shines. Nothing moves. And yet, you feel seen, watched, remembered, and somehow welcomed. You step outside and the cool morning air greets your face like a soft cloth. The first light of dawn hasn't yet turned the sky blue. It's still wrapped in lavender and deep gray, the kind of in-between hue that makes everything feel slower, quieter. Your feet make almost no sound on the street stones. Somewhere behind you, the doors of the bathhouse creak closed, not a slam, just a final sigh. You imagine the last tendrils of steam curling through the cracks, vanishing like dreams you'll forget by midday. There's a stillness now. The world hasn't woken yet, and you're walking through it like a sleepwalker. Say, cling, a little enchanted. And as your steps carry you forward, you begin to feel it, your body heavier but not in a burdensome way. More like your muscles have softened into sleep. Your thoughts too, slowing, stretching. Like a cat curling on a windowsill. You remember the warm stones, the splash of water, that laugh from the corner you never saw the source of, and maybe, just maybe, the soft whisper that wasn't quite from this world. None of it matters now. Not really, because you're here. Say, drowsy, floating gently towards sleep like a leaf drifting in a warm bath. You close your eyes, let your breath fall into rhythm. There's nothing left to hear, nothing left to wonder, only stillness, only rest, only sleep. Sweet dreams.